Hey, Dr. Nick Delgado and Dr. Tami streaming in live to you all over the world. You know, we have a lot in common. That is, our audience, but also Dr. Tami and I. Her and I are both published authors. We both kind of run in similar circles with the anti aging group and the American Academy of Anti Aging Medicine, which is pretty much reached all over the world. And we also hang out with people like Brendan Burchard, a stellar, amazing kind of help experts for the public to learn about us and what we're doing so we can help you. Dr. Tami, what is it about your new book that you're most excited about? Because I am thrilled to interview you about hormones. What is the title of the book? And tell me about it a little bit. And we're going to do a deep dive with the remaining 45 minutes we have to talk to the audience about hormones and how do hormones play a role in our life at every stage of life.
Yes, for sure. Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited. My book is called The Hormone Secret, and it was published a few years ago. We're getting ready for a relaunch, but there's still a ton of very pertinent information. And the secret hormone is testosterone for women.
I love it. And you know, Dr. Tami, guys always get the main stage when they talk about testosterone. We always think about men and what's your T level, and there's commercials on television. There's herbs purporting to say that they can reach those physiologic ideal levels, and all you and I have to do is run a free testosterone and a total and really verify whether these quote herbs are working or not. I mean, the reality is they either work or they don't, and you gain the functionality, and you've got to overcome placebo. Is placebo a possible role in some of these capsules that people are talking about to getting high level Ts?
I think placebo can never be completely taken off the table. I mean, there's been so many sort of published research about every medication, and there's a placebo. And for some of the people in the research that are in the placebo group, it works. So you can never take that off the table. But is that a bad thing? I mean, I think of our minds as a pharmacist. So your thoughts of the doctor, what do doctors do? They often write prescriptions, and then the prescriptions go to the pharmacists. Do the pharmacists change the prescriptions? Not at all, right? They just dispense what's on there. So if you have a thought of, I'm strong, I'm vital, I'm vibrant, I'm resilient, and those thoughts, I'm energetic, those thoughts are prescriptions that go to the pituitary. That pharmacist writes out all the hormones, writes out all the prescriptions, the chemicals, and that's released into your body. But what if your thoughts, your doctor is writing prescriptions about fear and anxiety and worry? Well, those go to the pituitary as well. And then the pharmacist will dispense those hormones and those chemicals. So I think that we are the CEO of our health in a much more powerful way than we ever thought.
I'm glad you mentioned that because my newest book, my 15th book coming out, is Stop Aging Now. Listen to this: 7 secrets to look and feel great forever.
That's a long time.
So, since I'm turning 69, my favorite number this year, I'm very active physically, emotionally, and I really kind of like to spread the word. And my earlier book on Valentine's Day came out, Mastering Love, Sex, and Intimacy. And us guys kind of equate our manhood with kind of whether we're present in the world and doing something and being able to exert our manhood and kind of feel like we matter in a strange way, right? Guys really tie that in, and yet they're so quiet. They don't want to talk about when things aren't functioning. And the statistics are, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Tami, but by the age of 60 or 70, like me, guys have about 60% incidence of ED, inability to perform in that very important place that us guys say, the bedroom. So let alone out on the athletic field, let alone in the boardroom, right? So what's going on? Why are these guys struggling? And could it be low T?
Well, it definitely could be. So I test all of our patients, and I'm blessed to have a lot of professional athletes, football players, basketball players, both currently active and retired. And just last week, I was working with a retired baseball player, a pro baseball player, and he is in his very early 30s. And his T level resembled somebody who was in their 80s. And he was like, why? Why is this happening? And, you know, nobody really knows. Is it the estrogens that are in the plastics and the pesticides in the food? Is it our adrenal glands, then our 24/7 lifestyle that is, really inhibiting? We don't know why, but we're seeing a drop in testosterone at a faster and earlier rate than ever before in history in men and in women. And in women, we don't need a lot, but it has an outsized role in how we look, feel, and function. And in men, men typically say, oh, my libido is fine. I don't have a problem with testosterone. That's not true. The most common symptom that I've seen in my practice in low T in men is that if you're not busy, you're asleep. So when you get home at the end of the day, had dinner, sit on the couch, do you fall asleep? That often is low T.
Well, I'm proud to say, like you, I've coached many celebrities, athletes, individuals who currently are on the field. And sometimes I'm once removed. I'm coaching one of the doctors and mentoring them about how to make sure their athletes are doing their absolute best, as you know. And Bob Delmonteque is an individual who, in his 80s, literally looked better than he did at age 17 or 67. Maybe you can see the image there on the screen in his abs, his shoulders, his biceps, right?
Absolutely. And, it takes more than testosterone. I always say if I took one of my patients who's a professional football player in their early 20s and I gave them a great diet and, of course, measured their testosterone, which would be high because they're 20, and I put them in bed, then they would lose muscle mass. So there's a lot going on. Our hormones work together as a symphony, but our bodies are complex organisms, and we can't just think of one thing out of all of them. They work together.
Well, there's a lot of discussion about peptides right now. And, I bring that up because peptides work synergistically with testosterone. In fact, some peptides are purported to enhance testosterone levels. But most importantly, we know that peptides like semirelin, GHR2, GHR6 will indeed enhance growth hormone levels. And the original studies with Dr. Rudman, which spawned the original book, Grow Young with HGH, and then my book, Grow Young and Slim, was that Rudman showed that using growth hormone with testosterone level that is testosterone intervention was the best combination, at least to reverse aging in the early stages of what we first started to appreciate the value of hormones. Would you agree with that comment?
Yeah, and I love peptides because it's upstream. And so I love when we are able to give our body a little nudge in the right direction and get it going. And so that's really what our peptides are doing. I much prefer the peptides over giving somebody growth hormone itself, for example. Our bodies are often really good at figuring it out. And there's so much emerging research on these peptides, BP 157 for injuries and for gut health. And there's just so many. There's for skin, for hair, for gut health, for muscle mass, for slimming. And it's really exciting time to be a doctor.
And, some of the states are pretty friendly regarding peptides, and other states are, for whatever reason, restrictive in our ability to get these incredible peptides. I'm just jumping ahead to a comment about peptides and the importance that you and I both appreciate and respect, because when you look at, for example, what this slide talks about, the immortal peptides. I mean, you almost feel immortal. You feel incredible. I know, like you mentioned, there's peptides for gut health, the immune system. What are your favorite hormones? And I'm going to right off the top tell you PT141 is very high on the list of fun and enjoyable hormones, that is peptides, because they also not only give you a nice suntan, protect you from the sun, they give you that really nice like feeling that stimulates from the brain. And I know it was also approved for women with arousal disorder. So it really picks up that libido and that energy and the ability to engage in the bedroom. It seems to be about a 4-hour delay though. Do you notice that?
Well, yeah, and the half-life as well. So it's something that, you have to understand the peptides. I think that the danger is that there are peptide companies out there that you don't even have to have a doctor to prescribe them or help you, and there's not a lot of doctors who are understanding it because there's not a lot of published research. It's emerging, but it's not there quite yet. So, you can say you're doing research and you can just order peptides online.
Right.
That's sort of terrifying, actually. I'm currently doing a peptide physician's certification. I think that anytime that there is something to learn, I want to dive deep. And so I'm loving learning about it. And, you kind of know what you know because I learn based on serving my patient population. And so I mentioned BP 157. I love that. But BP 157 was actually also brought up as an anti-doping. So there's a lot to be aware of. And I think education is where we need to stay instead of like pushing and prescribing, just more information, more education, more learning.
Yeah, I did a course for Dr. Kent Holtorf and his group, and he said it was one of the highest viewed talk of anyone who presented. I ended up talking about all the different, I don't know, I've been experimenting and utilizing over 50 different peptides over the years. I was one of the early adapters because I realized that if it's true that you can inject peptides, in some cases, you can actually do an oral delivery of a peptide. Certainly, they're using BP 157, as you mentioned, in capsule form and orally, and they're seeing good benefits. So I think it opens up the realm because a lot of people, when they hear, oh, you got, even though it's a tiny little insulin needle, it's like a little pinch, you hardly feel it. But, people are still kind of needle adverse. So when they hear, oh, I might be able to take an oral peptide, they're all ears. And in my experience, these oral peptides, so long as the people producing them, and I've been working with one group that does produce a growth hormone analog, and it's darn amazing. You notice your fingernails grow faster, your hair grows thicker. One of my guys was in my studio 2 days ago, and he looked at my hair and he goes, what are you doing, man? Your hair's thicker than I've ever seen it. I like kind of wink and I go, well, these peptides, I call it grow young. It's making me grow younger. Even though I'm approaching that 7th decade here in a few years, I just love that I'm alive at a time when you and I have the ability to educate, promote, and help people down that path of more than anti-aging. I think it's quality of life. Don't you, Dr. Tami?
Yeah, and I don't think there is any anti-aging. We are aging, and that is
Yeah.
just the fact of life. That's physics. Anybody who says otherwise is ridiculous. But what we do want to do is age fabulously and
Yes.
age gracefully and with strength and resilience. And so, addressing all of these things are really important, and getting them in forms that people are going to take is great. That we have a nationwide telehealth semaglutide clinic where we're able to provide semaglutide or the derivative, and people don't like the injections. So there is a pharmaceutical company who is actually working on FDA approval for an oral version because the form is important. People don't like shots. You're right.
Yep. And we've been working early with Dr. Eric Dady at University of Chicago, and he had developed a novel ability to deliver in the case of insulin, and actually the FDA approved an oral nasal delivery of insulin. And they always said, wait a minute, these peptides like insulin are too large of protein molecules. You can't absorb them. Yet we had the clinical evidence you could. And we went about then working on a project to allow the absorption of growth hormone. But then we realized, wait a minute, if we get it proven in clinical studies, they're going to classify it as a drug. So we stepped back and we said, okay, we're going to call it a homeopathic, keep it real fun and gentle and simple. Let the people report that they're getting results. And there may be a few docs out there who might say, hey, wait, where's the clinical studies? Well, you know what? If you want the clinical studies, you're going to pay a ridiculous sum of money for a product that actually works. So we leave it up to the audience, right? I'm excited that people are open in the nutraceutical arena to herbs, supplements, but you got to test them. You got to try them and go beyond that placebo and say, hey, your hair is either growing in thicker or not. Your skin is either getting more supple, and your muscle sarcopenia, you're starting to reverse that tendency, right, of loss of musculature and strength and tissue. So you and I agree, we're all aging. No one's going to deny that. And anyone who does, it's great to talk and use words like immortal and forever, but aging sucks. It's tough. And I mean, look at the chest, the legs, the arms, the neck of this individual. And, we see it. We look in the mirror, we see elements of it. So what is it about mitochondria, telomeres? What is it about the hormone signaling and peptides that tends to tell the body, wait a minute, you're not as old as you actually are chronologically. Let's see what we can do to kind of enhance this process and slow it down.
Yes, and then, there's layers, right? So we've got all those things which are super vital. And then what does our body do with them? What's your methylation process like? And, they're actually aging clocks that are used in research. And a big part about figuring out how fast or how slow you're aging at the cellular level, which doesn't have anything to do with how long you've been on this earth, is, a deeper level about how you're methylating. And there's just so much that when you go to your doctor, there's just no way in 10 minutes that this is going to be discussed or brought up or uncovered or offered. And so I think that I have an idea. My idea is that we rename our healthcare and we name it sick care, because I'm awfully grateful that if somebody that I love, or even myself, had appendicitis, that there was a surgeon who had medicine and could cut it open and take it out, and I wouldn't die of a burst appendix and sepsis. But it has nothing to do with health. Even the wellness exams are really just looking for diseases and diagnoses at the earliest ages. So I vote that we change the name and we call it sick care. And then all of us in the wellness and functional medicine and integrative medicine space, we take over healthcare. What do you think?
I love the idea. And Dr. Tami, it's clear, and I don't know if this is folklore or not. I've traveled to China several times, but over 4,000 years ago, they were tinkering with hormones. And it's interesting that they actually had discovered that they could take the urine from very young females, say at optimum 18 to 21 years old, and very young males, 18 to 21, when they were at their hormone production peak. And of course, the urine collects or allows all of these hormone cascades to enter into the system. And Dr. Jonathan Wright, who's I think up towards your area, and he's kind of considered the grandfather of hormones, right, Dr. Tami?
Yeah, he's actually considered the grandfather of functional medicine as well. I mean, he really was the first MD to look outside the cutting and drugging box.
Yeah. And so I have an image here of the genesis of China and how literally in their textbooks, they were taking these young people. I'm not sure, they never quite described in the book as far as I could tell, but how they dried the urine and put it into some kind of a cream paste and rubbed it in the skin, because the skin is transdermal, right? We can absorb hormones clearly. So you're talking over 100 hormones absorbed in the body, and they knew about this back in 4000 BC, which is just amazing to me, right? So
Same in Rome. So, the urinals at the Colosseum were where everyone urinated. And so then they would take a resin gum, they'd let the urine dry, and they'd roll up the the crystals, because, and then they would give them to the royal family and people of importance. And they knew that there was something in there that was full of vitality as well.
Yeah, there's this guy out there called the Liver King, and he was saying that he's, not using any steroids and so forth. And it's interesting. Of course, it came out he's using 10 grand worth a month of various synthetic, and we're more into bioidentical. I challenged him to a weightlifting contest, and he kept ignoring me. He was a little fearful that this old guy that's here 24 years older than him was going to whoop him, and I know I would have. But the point was, that's that competitive side of the testosterone talking, right? The growth hormone and testosterone. But, he brought up a point, and that was, these peptides are really amazing and fabulous for gladiators, for athletes, for people. And we have an unfortunate situation where here the aging community could benefit from all this work, and yet the stigma with sports athletes as they age, we could have them out on the field for quite a few more years, the Barry Bonds of the world, right? And yet they get in trouble. And I think it would really needs to happen is to kind of allow that field to, instead of using gym rats, to use, back street type synthetic, inject this, inject that, and not know what they're doing, risking their life literally, versus doing it correctly, right? Monitoring their bioidentical hormones, their 24-hour urine, checking their saliva, their blood, their indicators of health. Some of these peptides used inappropriately and excess, because that's their problem. A little is good, more is better. So we've got to reel these people in and educate, right, Dr. Tami?
Yeah, education and information is key. And like I said, it's an emerging field of medicine, and so you got to keep up. You just got to keep up. There's the way I practice. I've been seeing patients and I've been practicing medicine for over 20 years, and the way I practice now is not nearly the same. I've even done a 180 on some of my thoughts and processes and recommendations from even 5 years ago. So you have to stay open. And I think that's one problem in medicine, is that we don't ponder, we don't question, we don't say why. We're vehemently opposed until we accept it. And, we see that very much so in Western traditional medicine. It's no, 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 no. Like even the physician in Australia who said that an ulcer was from bacteria, he had his medical license removed for heresy. I mean, this was just unheard of. That, no, you must be crazy. That can't be it. And not until he infected himself with the bacteria and proved it did they finally. And now everybody gets a prescription for an antibiotic when you see an ulcer in an endoscopy, because we know it's from a bacterium. So we vehemently deny it until the moment that we accept it, and there's no openness, no curiosity, no questioning in between, and that's wrong.
And Dr. Tam, for better part of 45 years, I've been looking at people's blood under a high-powered microscope. I take them into these conferences, the doctors line up, I examine and evaluate their blood under a high-powered phase contrast microscope and help them to identify the structures of the blood, fungus in the blood, if it's there, or the white blood cells, the immune system, the red cells, the absorption of vitamins and minerals. And now I'm offering online courses to train doctors and educators, because I think this is kind of a lost art. And I'm thrilled because finally, kind of with the world shutting down at some point here recently, they started wondering, well, how are these people getting sick and what's going on? And are there ways to strengthen the immune system with herbs, supplements, lifestyle, diet, exercise, outdoor daylight, making love? Love and connection is part of our hormones too, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
testosterone.
And sleep. I mean, your growth hormone literally is released while you sleep. And if you're not sleeping, it's not happening. Your kids literally grow overnight.
Yeah, sleep is amazing. My little 14-year-old is now 6 foot tall, and I'm like, he's towering over me, and I'm
Wow.
like, wow, it's just amazing to me. And he's growing a beard and the whole thing. He's got a girlfriend, and I'm like, he's 14. I'm like, what? But I'm after him. The thing is, this generation, they like to stay up all night playing the video games here during the summer. I'm like, oh gosh, it's tough, right? Because their clocks, circadian rhythms affect their testosterone levels too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then also the mental health, getting up when and seeing the sunlight on your naked eyeballs before you see a screen. All of these things have a whole cascade of effects. So morning sunlight, first thing, actually affects the release of your melatonin at night, which is a hormone. So everything's interconnected.
And that connection obviously goes even further. And I think that I wanted to kind of zero in on here for a little bit about why do women need testosterone hormone replacement? And in some cases, is it elegant in that testosterone bioidentical, whether it be by pellets, cream, or Troche, or whatever your choice of introduction, will some of that aromatize over into some estrogen? They may not need to have estrogen replacement if the testosterones are administered, because testosterone is concentrated even more in a woman's body than estrogen. It's picograms versus nanograms. Is any of this ring true? And can you unpack that?
Yes, but not every woman or man aromatizes their testosterone to estrogen. There's actually a study in Australia that they had women who had breast cancer that was estrogen positive breast cancer, but they were having horrible hot flashes and night sweats. So they were trying to figure out, well, what can we do? So they gave them testosterone, and then they made sure that the testosterone did not get converted into estrogen by giving them an estrogen blocker, because of course they didn't want to feed any estrogen related cancer cells. And their hot flashes and their night sweats went away. So there's so much more that testosterone does in a woman's body than we realize. It
So
has a
pause a
lot.
moment. What you're saying, Dr. Tammy, is just administering testosterone, it gave the benefit of estrogen. So they literally, as I pointed out, did not have to take what some people are fearful of estrogen after those earlier studies with synthetic estrogen, but they got the benefit of both, the best of both worlds, right?
Yeah, well, and yay, because now we know that we can customize things and we can make it personalized medicine. I think that's the future of taking care of patients, is really to personalize it. And testosterone for women has everything to do with how we look, feel, and function. Our muscle to fat ratio. You cannot make muscle if you have no testosterone. Your energy. Testosterone used to be used to treat depression a long time ago. It also helps bone health. There's all this focus on um, estrogen as being the only hormone for bone health, but progesterone stimulates the cells called osteoblasts, which build bone, and testosterone also participates in bone health. So there's so many ways. Energy, your brain. We have testosterone receptors in our brain. So it's a really important thing. And I can't tell you how many patients that I say, they say, well, I'll get my regular doctor to order my blood test. I said, okay, but make sure that they do order everything on this list. And then they come back and they say, my doctor said I didn't need to test my testosterone. Well, of course you do. It's the whole symphony. It all works together. And, perhaps you have enough total testosterone, but it's all stuck on your sex hormone binding globulin and you don't have any free testosterone. So you got to know.
Bingo.
Yeah, you got to know what's available for your cells to actually do something with. There's no point in having a construction project and having all of the workers sit in the truck. Nothing's going to happen.
And isn't in functional medicine the ability to recognize that certain important nutrients such as zinc help to support healthy testosterone levels? Boron. We know that Avenus sativa, stinging nettles, horny goatweed, they sound funny names, but they actually bind to the
Definitely.
sex. right? They bind to that sex hormone binding globulin and they release more bioavailable free testosterone, correct?
And maca. Maca is just an herb. It's the
Right.
most ancient medicinal herb on earth. And yeah, maca as well is a good one. Ashwagandha. So there's lots of
Yeah,
ways.
you're naming off about 20 different herbs and minerals that I put in Dr. Delgado's testosterone booster. And I know you've formulated and worked on some incredible formulas as well. And we see that, listen, that allows us to use the bioidentical hormone maybe at a lower dose, not having to use it as frequent, maybe doing microdosing, whatever's going to work. But that synergistic benefit, not depending only on the herbs and the minerals, but also working together with, as you said, each individual. How can we optimize that person? Because if they're a warring athlete versus maybe a bookworm at a computer, they may not need to have the levels that I like to have when I go, train and compete against these 20, 30-year-old studs and want to beat them and embarrass them on camera, right? And on television. It's just fun. But I have this thing about showing them up and saying, hey, you know what? Us old guys still rule. So you better pay attention.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And we're still the ones hiring you.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah. And then the creams, I put DHEA, pregnenolone, DIM to kind of modify excess estrogens because transdermally and chrysin, and then using some plant androgens so we can do this. So what are your preferred forms of testosterone intervention for women? Tell us about that.
So I don't recommend oral. I know that troches are
Agreed.
supposedly sublingual and it goes into the bloodstream. I just don't find that that is happening. I think everybody's swallowing it and it's going through the GI system, into the liver, into the P450 system. A lot of my colleagues in traditional Western medicine say that topical cream-based hormones are useless, they don't work. And then that just doesn't make any sense. First of all, you don't have to believe in anything. You test, you get
Right.
the data before intervention, then test after. Did you make a difference? So it's just objective data. There's no opinion, there's no belief, it's just data.
And Dr. Tami, it's not just in the lab values, it's how does the patient feel? Treat the patient too, not just the lab
That's
value,
even the
correct?
most important, but you want to
Right.
prove absorption with, and make sure it's safe by getting data. But the second thing is that I get so frustrated with traditional medicine with the criticism. On one hand, they say, well, topical hormones are useless. You should never do it. Run if you have a doctor that's telling you to use topical hormones. And then on the other hand, the first thing that will happen to you if you go into the emergency department with chest pain is we'll put cream on you. Nitrogel, nitroglycerin.
Right.
Why? Because it'll be absorbed. Nitro paste. Yes, under the tongue as well, but nitro paste is used because transdermal works. You do have to check, trust, but verify, but transdermal does work. And I think that the mucous membrane, like the vaginal tissue, is a great option for delivery of a lot of it. There's even the estrogen ring called estring is actually a vaginal estradiol. And so there's lots and lots of different options for not just testosterone, but estrogen as well.
Well stated. And I think there was some unnecessary fear cast in both men regarding prostate cancer and testosterone. And I believe Dr. Abraham Morgentaler, kind of the Harvard professor, laid that controversy to rest. And then in women concerned about, if you will, breast cancer and various cancers, and rightfully show we need to be aware of how hormones affect us. But you wouldn't just give people like in a petri dish just hormones. You treat, you get them on a healthy diet, you exercise. You've got to take those lifestyle factors into account. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, if you just give them hormones and you don't know who you're dealing with and how they're living, you're going to get an outcome that may not be desirable and may not be the hormones problem, especially with some of these athletes and the way they kind of do these things and these kind of extreme diets and things. So what do we need to do on that point?
I think a holistic approach is always a good idea, and stress is part of it as well. You know, the hormone cortisol is very inflammatory, and that can change how your hormones are processed through your body. I just feel that each person needs to be addressed as an individual, not just what type of hormone, looking at the data, getting the levels, making the recommendations, but also compliance. So there's absolutely no point in me telling a patient that I want you to put your bioidentical hormones vaginally, and then inside their head they're like, that's never happening, that's just gross. I need to know. So communication and partnership, I want patients to know, I want people to know your doctor works for you, and you can fire them if they're not serving you, if they're not a partner helping you. Fire them and go get to someone else they'll work with you.
You bring up an important hormone, and that relates to the adrenals. And I think there's some, I guess, misinformation, but there's so many people out there that have depleted their ability to produce proper amounts of cortisol, and they become adrenaline junkies. They live and thrive off adrenaline. Then they cause drama. You know, they might eat greasy, sugary, salty foods. They might go to extremes and kind of mess up their whole circadian rhythm. Tell us a little bit the importance of balancing out the adrenals at the same time that when you're looking at androgen and anabolic versus catabolic, is there some need to balance this out for balance of adrenals?
Well, in our late 30s and definitely in our 40s and 50s and beyond, our sex hormone production goes from the gonads, from the testes and the ovaries, and it starts to move to being produced in the adrenal glands. And the adrenal glands are these tiny little walnut-sized organs that sit on top of your kidneys. And they neither have the time, the energy, or the raw ingredients to deal with what stresses you and produce the hormones to bless you. There's just not enough to go around. So when you're constantly stressed, what happens at the beginning is that the cortisol levels go up, right? There's a bear, run for your life, and you got to run. But as it goes on and on and on, it's kind of like going up a hill, right? You get your car, you're going up the hill, you're doing fine. Ooh, then it gets hard and you have to shift gears into third. And then if you keep going, you got to shift down into second. And so your cortisol levels go lower and lower and lower the longer the stress continues. And that takes a real toll, and it tells us a lot about what's going on in the adrenals. But you know, the adrenals have this beautiful rise and fall throughout the day. It's called your circadian rhythm, your diurnal production, higher in the morning and then down, little dip at about 3:30, and then down to go to sleep. But a lot of patients have it flat or inverted. They get this peak and they're not going to bed because at about 10:30, they're like, oh, I'm finally awake. So it's good to test. A salivary test that tests 4 times in one day is the best to see what is going on, because your cortisol can tell us about other hormones, because it's, especially if you're in your 40s and 50s and 60s, because that's the production, that's the factory.
And there are certain herbs, ashwagandha, echinacea, tart cherry, caprylic acid to combat fungal forms, the grapefruit extract, garlic. All these things seem to help tremendously for adrenal support, don't they?
Yes, and I find that it depends on what stage of adrenal dysfunction is happening. And, you know, again, traditional medicine will say your adrenals are working perfectly, or you have Addison's, or you have Cushing's. Like you're either diseased on either side or you're perfect. But we don't say that about the thyroid. You know, we do have a thyroid storm, we have Graves, and we have, you know, these two opposites, but we have hypofunction, we have hypothyroidism, and then we give a little bit of thyroid medication. I think the adrenal glands would be better served if we approached it that way. But it takes knowing what stage and what type of dysfunction is going on. There's some patients who they're exhausted in the mornings. They don't have that rise. And so, something in the morning to pick them up. But then there's other people who have their rise when they're supposed to be going to bed. So taking an adaptogen, that's something that's going to calm the adrenals down, is good. And then not just chemical. We have three aspects of our health. We have the structure, we have the chemical, and then we have the electrical, the frequency. And we can change the frequency and energy and electricity of our cells with meditation. And this isn't woo-woo. This is actually proven in great research. And so we can actually change our function by adding all three modalities.
I love it. And it's true that the mind body connection is clearly one which we're all finally starting to acknowledge. And who hasn't been under more stress in recent times and recognize that it's affecting their performance, how they feel, how they look, and their habits. And, obviously, whether we call it the flu or a massive decline in the function of the immune system worldwide that we all became educated about. But the reality was that people are not paying attention, and they need to understand about nitric oxide, estrogen dominance, and why are they struggling to lose belly fat? Do you have people who are struggling with the weight and they don't realize there's a hormonal component?
So, like I mentioned, we have this nationwide semaglutide weight loss program through telehealth.
Yeah.
And, we do things very differently. You have to get your lab work done. You have to get your hormones checked, and there's no fee. It's included. I think it's absolutely criminal that there are all these prescriptions that are being written and saying, bye, contact us if you have any side effects or if things aren't working. If you don't check your hormones, A, you won't be as successful in your weight loss, or B, you'll go right back. You're not going to be able to maintain it long term. You're likely struggling to lose weight because of your hormone imbalance.
So what we're saying is obviously that the hormonal intervention is not the be all and end all solution. It is an integrative approach: diet, exercise, sleep, getting outdoor sunlight, love and happiness. All these things play a role. But if we ignore the hormones, it's going to make it so much tougher. And they may not reach their goals without having a balance, an orchestra of these hormones, correct?
Absolutely.
Dr. Tami, it's such a pleasure. I'm going to have you back on the show as soon as possible.
It would be my honor.
Yeah, we appreciate the work that you're doing out there. Tell me the title of your book again and the website.
So my book is called The Hormone Secret. My clinic is called BioThrive. You can contact us at biothrivelife.com. And we provide complimentary consultations to learn how we can serve you best. And we'd be delighted to connect with you.
Absolutely. Well, this is Dr. Nick Delgado. I want all of you to appreciate that you're looking collectively at decades of work and focus and understanding, not only starting out probably as our own story, but being able to help people, literally tens of thousands of people over the years. When I wrote the original book, Grow Young and Slim, and came out with this theory in the early 1994, and I talked about Acne Be Gone for Good, co-written with Dr. Batterisi, board-certified dermatologist, and John Gray talking about mastering love, sex, and intimacy and how important love and connection is. And my newest book, StopAgingNowBook.com. I want everyone to check that out. It's coming out here in a few weeks, and I'll be happy to send you an early review copy, Dr. Tami. But, I want one final story from you. What got you started to learn about hormones and functional medicine and supplements everything that you're involved with. Tell me briefly, what is your story? The Brendan Burchard, hey, let's get her on stage and have your 30 seconds, your 3 minutes of fame here before you sign off.
Or infamy. So medicine is my second job. I danced as a soloist in a ballet company for over a decade. And so I went to medical school late, and I was in residency when I was in my late 30s, early 40s. And I was exhausted. But, a lot of women should on themselves, like, oh, I should go to bed earlier. I should drink less coffee. I should. And that's why I'm tired. I was literally laying down on the floor between patients because I was so exhausted. Now, yes, I had a baby, I had a toddler, and I was pregnant, and I was in residency, and all that adds up to being exhausted. But I thought, it shouldn't be this bad. So I ran some blood tests, got my hormones checked, iron, thyroid, the usual traditional Western. And I came back fine. And I was like, I don't feel fine. Fine must not mean fine. It's a 4-letter word. I don't want to be fine. So I ran an expanded version with free testosterone and, all these other tests. And I couldn't believe I had none. I was so depleted in my hormones, and I had no testosterone. And so once I started to restore my own hormones, I felt alive again. And it wasn't so much just the energy, but of course that was it. It was my ability to connect, my ability to enjoy relationships. I was so tired that if my toddler put something on the floor, which toddlers obviously do, I would just have to breathe because I would be so frustrated. Not anymore. So I learned that when you can change someone's hormones, you can change their life. And then went and studied functional medicine, naturopathic medicine, got certified in that, even though I was an MD. So now I can't not have a dualistic approach.
And in finality, addressing the power of the mind, you work with other practitioners as well. I mean, I do timeline therapy, NLP, hypnosis, and I work with other practitioners that do Zoom calls or in person. So that's important too, right? To keep people on track and in that positive mindset.
Yes, and I think that it's more powerful than people understand. You actually can change your health a great deal. And I think that meditation is super important. And everybody says, well, what type of meditation do you do? Well, I do lots of different ones because I have lots of different, ways that I feel in a certain day. I'm very blessed to be close with Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I think his work is amazing, very evidence-based, doing tons of great research with some universities. I also love Andy's work with Headspace. I love Dr. Andrew Weil, his breathing stuff. I love Dr. Wayne Dyer. You just need to have a lot in your tickle trunk, because sometimes when I'm sitting down and I go, okay, I'm going to do a quiet breathing meditation, my brain is too distracted. I can't settle down. And so, okay, I need to have a guided meditation. So I listen to somebody and can take me on the journey with them. But other times when I listen to a guided meditation, I was like, oh, that voice irritates me right now. I just need quiet. So there's no right meditation, and you're going to suck at it when you start. And it's okay. It is going to make a difference. Doing meditation is like walking. There's no such thing as a bad walk. You've done your exercise. So meditation, mind, body, all of it together is the way to stay truly strong and resilient.
Well, Dr. Tami, author of Hormone Secret, Dr. Nick here, Stop Aging Now, the 7 Secrets to Look and Feel Great Forever. We're here to support you, so please get in touch. And if you're already part of our tribe, continue, because the most important thing is not that 1 or 2 time exposure. In our experience, and I'm sure you find this to be the case, Dr. Tami, the more your patients and clients participate in your programs and your support education, the more they learn. And maybe it was just some little way they said it, or how they explained something that maybe before was a little complex and unclear, and then the light bulb went off and you go, oh, I got this. I can do this. When you get to that stage, that's when your mind opens up and you start, as you pointed out so clearly, Dr. Tami, you start really embracing this as your primary form of healthcare. That traditional stuff, yeah, get in an auto accident, something happens, they're there for you. But now you have to move over and be an advocate of your own health, your own well-being, your own happiness. And we're here to guide you as your mentor, as your people that are excited. I know you and I met and we were talking a little off screen before we got started, but you and I sat down for a reason next to each other at a Brendan Burchard event, and you had already been following me. That was kind of
Yeah, I
fun.
almost swallowed my tongue. I'm like, oh, it's him. You're a pioneer in this, and I'm grateful for all the work you do.
And I'm grateful for your work, and we'll continue to thrive and help many, many people. But you got to open up your mind, folks. Thanks. Be well, be strong, take care. And I know you got to get off to see those patients, and I've got to keep on with each of the broadcasts. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Have a beautiful day.